Welcome to my preview of the national championship game featuring number 3 Georgia versus number 1 Alabama, 13-1 Georgia versus 13-1 Alabama, in a season that has just been absolutely insane. I mean, this has been one of the craziest seasons of college football in a return to quote-unquote normalcy after the COVID season last year. This season has been anything but normal, with teams that you thought weren't going to even be anything this year getting into the top 4, top 5. You look at Penn State, look at Iowa, and then both those teams losing to Purdue. Upsets left and right. The most top 25 or at least top 10 upsets of any season ever. You've got teams, underdog story. Cincinnati makes it to the college football playoffs. How crazy is that? Everything that could happen this season has happened. And maybe it's a little comforting in a season of so much insanity to have something so predictable as Georgia and Alabama, the two favorites all along, the two teams that you looked at and you knew they were the best teams in the country all along, that you knew were going to end up there. It's somewhat comforting to find those two teams in the championship game here with an SEC versus SEC matchup. A second time the SEC has gotten two teams into the championship game here in the playoff era. Of course, LSU, Alabama meeting up national championship regular teams previously, but more for that. But second time CFP area, we get two SEC teams matching up against each other. And yeah, I think all of us really wanted to. I mean, besides maybe the Georgia, Alabama fans watching, sure. But I think the rest of us really probably wanted to see a Michigan-Cincinnati. I mean, wouldn't that have been the cherry on the insanity pie that we've had this year? I mean, that would have been amazing. But obviously, Georgia, Alabama proving in both of those games, proving themselves far superior to their opponents that they matched up against. And these are the two best teams that we see facing off against each other. So I'm incredibly excited to preview this video. I have had so much fun just previewing this season as we've gone along from the very beginning when I previewed every single game, and then throughout the season itself, and then now I've previewed every single bowl game, and now getting to preview the national championship game. It's been an absolute blessing to get to do this season. It's going to be a long off season. I'll find some content to put out, but I cannot wait for next year, and I hope that it's just as crazy as this one. Now let's get into this bowl game at hand here. So it's number 3 Georgia, 13-1, going up against number 1 Alabama, also 13-1. Monday, January 10th, 8 p.m. on ESPN. Georgia. Now this might be a little bit of a surprise, and I think it is considering the regular season win. It's not regular season. Sorry, the win by Alabama in that SEC championship game. Georgia is the favorite team by 3 points, and even by ESPN, FPI, given a 58.2% chance of winning. Now, that might be because Alabama is facing some injury issues. Now, that might be a factor. I think there's some other issues here. Nick Saban keeping those injury rosters close to his chest. We're not entirely sure what's going on with these players, but we do know that they have at least 2 starting offensive linemen that are dealing with issues that looked like they were dealing with issues in that Cincinnati game, which came out during that Cincinnati game. And then they're also missing, well, not missing necessarily, but like I said, we're not sure exactly what's going on, but there is an injury to their starting cornerback, Davis. So this might be a little bit of a different Alabama team that takes the field, but we're going to talk about this here later in the video. I think it's also going to be a different Georgia team than the one that took the field, and maybe not player-wise, maybe not key pieces-wise, but I think overall, at least the way they approach the game, is going to be a different Georgia team than took the field in that SEC championship game. So let's look at the series history here before we get into the bowl preview specifically itself. Series history between these two teams, they have met up a lot of times in the past. Alabama owning the series 42 wins to Georgia's 25 wins. They actually played, their first ever game was 1895, so one of the first ever college football games ever. 1895, a 30-6 win by Georgia, and then it took Alabama a little while, 1904, so a few years there before they were able to get their first win in the series, 16-5 win, and then Alabama has really owned the modern series. The last 7 years, so 2008 through 2021, not 7 years, the last 7 matchups, 2008 through 2021, Alabama has won every single one of those. So they have won 7 straight out. Georgia hasn't won a game in this series going back to 2007 there. So, and these are not just, regular season or minor matchups. These have been big time, big scale matchups between these two programs. 3 SEC championship games and 1 CFP national championship game. So not the first time that these two teams are meeting up here in the national championship. So SEC championship wins coming for Alabama in 2012, 2018, and then of course this season, and then a CFP national championship win coming into the 2017 season. 2018, of course, for the bowl game, but 2017 season, 26-23 in that one. Let's talk a little bit. I said I promised to get right into the bowl preview itself, but real fast, let's talk about the CFP history of these teams. Alabama has owned the CFP. Now, they've not won it every year, but they do have they have been regular visitors, regular appearances in it. They have gone to 12 different CFP games, including playoffs and national championships, and they have won 9 of those. They've won 6 of those by 3 scores or more, including their last win against Cincinnati. That spans 2014-2021. They've featured in every single one of those years. Sorry, I think, oh man, I might be wrong on that. I think they might have missed one season. I'm really blanking on it. I think they might have missed one season, but I don't think they have. I think they've been in it every single year. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the remarks section of this video. Main point here is 12 appearances, won 9, 6 of those by 3 scores or more. 3 national championship wins in that time span. For Georgia, they have made some appearances, not the dominant record that Alabama's had. And actually, Georgia's only had 2 seasons, this one included, that they actually made it in. But they've had 3 appearances, technically. They've had 2 wins and 1 loss. They won their first appearance in the 2017 season, of course, 2017, and they won their first appearance in the playoffs, and then it went and lost to Alabama in the national championship game there. But they have 2 wins now because they absolutely destroyed Michigan. Honestly, when you compare those playoff games, Alabama's game versus Cincinnati and Georgia's game versus Michigan, Cincinnati looked like a more capable team in that matchup versus Alabama than Michigan did versus Georgia. I mean, Michigan never even looked close to being in that game, 34-11. Whereas at least Cincinnati, some people say that Alabama put it on cruise control. I don't agree with that. But, you know, when you saw Cincinnati playing, they were able to make strides against Alabama's defense. And there was some points in that game where Cincinnati looked like they might, especially early on in that game, might be able to make this thing interesting. So, obviously neither of these teams matched up at all. Completely outmatched both on paper and on the field in both of these games. But at least Cincinnati looked capable and competent. Now, we're going to talk about that. That might have something to do with Alabama specifically versus Cincinnati, but I think that Cincinnati did have the better showing between the 2 games. So record reviews here. Actually, both these teams basically doing exactly what I predicted that they would almost. I think I was 1 game off in Alabama. I said they'd go undefeated. Of course, they have the 1 loss. For Georgia, I said they'd go 12-0 with a loss to Alabama in the national championship game, and Georgia did exactly what I predicted they would do. Not a lot of people did, because it was at the beginning of the season, my channel hadn't really grown yet, but when I was previewing every single team, I also previewed the playoffs. At the very beginning of the season, I said, this is my, way too early, throw it out there projection. I actually predicted that Alabama and Georgia would meet in the CFP. Now, I thought they would meet in the playoff round, but I did predict that they would get in there at number 1 and number 4, respectively, and that Alabama would advance to the national championship game. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as far as record reviews. Not necessarily having the exact season, and I won't mention the other 2 teams I thought would be in the CFP because I was way off on those 2 teams, but at least I was 50% here shooting at least on which 2 teams would get into the college football playoffs. Now, how those teams got to this point? Well, Alabama, it's been a little of a rocky road, especially for an Alabama program that is used to dominating across the board. Alabama, they own a loss against Texas A&M, a 41-38 loss, and they won 4 of their games by less than a possession. Florida, LSU, Arkansas, Auburn. None of those teams elite. Arkansas having a much better year this season, beating Penn State, but Auburn losing in its bowl game, and they had to take 4 overtimes to beat Auburn. Now, of course, you've got the rivalry factor there. That's going to play into it, but still, Florida and LSU, that's really not a good look, especially LSU, which just looks terrible this year. I mean, so bad that Ed Oregon, after taking them to a national championship and winning it a couple seasons ago, is forced to step down. I mean, so you don't want to be in close games with those teams. And then, of course, during the playoffs, they are not blowing Cincinnati out like a lot of people expected them to. Georgia, really completely the opposite story. Started off the season with a 10-3 win against Clemson. No teams could really get any offensive going. It looked like, hey, this might be, it's not such a bad close win for Georgia. Clemson might be able to pull it out and be a better team this season. They weren't. Clemson really wasn't that great this year. They pulled it off kind of at the end, but not great this year. So that's kind of a bad close win. But the rest of them by Georgia, I mean, they didn't lose any more games until they played Alabama, and they won every single game besides that Clemson game. They won every single game by 23 points or more, including their playoff game against Michigan. In fact, if you take out the playoff game, the regular season, they won every regular season game by 24 points or more. So absolutely destroyed every single team that they played, all the way up to Alabama. When they came and faced Alabama, they lost that game 41-24. Now, I want to talk about that real quick here before we get into the top players and then 3 keys of the game and then my prediction. So let's talk about that real quick. So why did Georgia lose to Alabama? Obviously, looking at this record, you know, they played a lot of the same teams Alabama did, and they beat those teams by a lot more. I think they played a tougher schedule than Alabama did. Alabama, a team that's been struggling along this season. Why did Georgia go in and lose that game? Well, I think it comes down to 2 things. First one, less motivated. Georgia was into the playoffs. Whether they won or lost that game, they were in the playoffs. They had really nothing to play for. And Alabama had everything to play for. They already had a loss on their belt to Texas A&M. If they lost that game, they were not getting. There were some very strong candidates, including Notre Dame. Probably would have been the next team in. Obviously, they're sitting there just outside. So there were a lot of strong candidates pushing at the door there. You know, you had Notre Dame. You had Ohio State, I think, was a good candidate. Maybe not so late on in the season. Oklahoma State, of course, close until losing to Baylor. So you had a lot of teams pushing on their back end there, and they had to win this game against Georgia. So when you look at matchups, when you look at programs, of course, when you come to the national championship, you can't use this because both teams are equally motivated. Well, when I look specifically at bowl games, late regular season games, and conference championship games, the thing that I look at that has the highest impact on my prediction who's going to win that game is who is the most motivated. Because I think your motivation, that is going to absolutely push you to the finish line and push you to maybe do things that you maybe otherwise wouldn't. You know, you're going to play in a play style that's going to be some high risk, high reward kind of circumstances, and it's that kind of gutsy play calling that gets you big wins. And Alabama had to win this game. Now, the second factor here is that I think Georgia didn't want to reveal their full strength. They were smart here. Like I said, they had nothing to play for in this game. The best thing that Georgia gets out of winning that SEC championship game, besides, of course, the championship trophy, every team wants to own that, but and obviously, if they even losing, they can get it. You can get that status back by beating Alabama if they make it to the national championship. So on their mind, the only thing that they gain out of beating Alabama in that is that they don't have to face Alabama in the playoffs. Now, that might be a good thing necessarily. I mean, Alabama probably looking at that team, you're looking at the other players on the field, they're definitely the better team versus those other players. But those other teams are also very good. So there's not really anything for Georgia to play for in that matchup. And honestly, Georgia, being smart and the way they've played this season, I absolutely think that they kept their cards hidden in that one. Didn't play to lose. I'm not saying they did play to lose, but I think that they definitely didn't necessarily do everything they needed to win. So this Georgia team that we're going to see this coming Monday, this Georgia team that we're going to see is going to be a very, very different team than the one that we saw take the field against Alabama in the SEC championship game. Just like Alabama's missing some key players, and they might be a little bit of a different team as well. All right, so let's look at the top players for both these programs, and I'm going to go with four off the bat top here for Alabama. They are, I really wanted to keep it to 3, but I just couldn't with the amount of talent just spread across this Alabama team at key positions. I mean, they really have highlight reel players. That's what you look at when you see Alabama here. So obviously, starts off, Heisman winner. That's going to be the number one guy. Of course, Bryce Young, their true sophomore quarterback, 4,503 yards, third in the nation. 46 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Backing him up is a great ground game behind Robinson, who, considering how prolific the passing game is, it's amazing that he's had this many opportunities and has been so successful on the run game. A lot of times you see quarterbacks that have these 4,000 plus passing yards. You have a running back with sub 1,000, but not for Alabama, not Robinson. They are a true dual threat team with definitely a dynamic, balanced attack. So Robinson Jr., 1,275 yards rushing, 14 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry average. Now they have 2 really good wide receivers, but I'm going to focus on the one with the most yards here, at least in my top players preview. Williams, 1,507 yards, 1,507 yards receiving, 15 touchdowns, and then 20.1 yard per catch average. And then their defense is, Alabama's defense is always strong. You win. You have championship level teams are built around the defenses, and that is no exception this season. We're looking at the linebacker Anderson. I kind of scribbled his name here, but I believe it is Anderson. Linebacker Anderson Jr., 97 tackles. This is the number that made me pop. That forced me to put him into my top players of the game here. It really, really did. 17.5 sacks. Now, I knew that he was a good player. I knew Alabama had playmakers. I was not tracking that he had this many sacks. These are video game numbers. I mean, one of my favorite games is NCAA Football 14. I cannot wait for the release of the new video game that's going to be up there, and they promise in 2023. Sidetrack. But one of my favorite games, NCAA Football 2014, and it's a pretty successful, prolific season on a video game if you can get 18, 20 tackles. Somewhere 15 to 20 tackles. I mean, that's you being successful at a video game level. This is real flesh and blood at the SEC level, going up against outstanding offensive linemen. Great quarterbacks, and he has 17.5 sacks. That is mind-blowing. Added to that, he also has 2 passes defended. I was going through and I was looking at these statistics here, prepping for this video, and I've watched Alabama play. I've watched him play. I knew he was a great player, but I somehow wasn't tracking that 17.5 sacks. Number 1 in the nation in sacks. I think he's had like 200 yards or something massive yardage loss in those. Maybe it's not 200, maybe it's like 108. But I mean, it is massive amount of yardage lost throughout his sacks and the impact that he has on a team. Now let's look at Georgia. So these video game numbers: 4,000 plus passing yards, 1,200 yards rushing by their running back, 5 yards per carry average, 5.1 yards per carry average, 1,500 yards receiving, 17 sacks. Those are all video game numbers. When you get down to Georgia, you come a little bit more down to earth, a lot more down to earth. I mean, these are not impressive stats here. Stetson Bennett, 2,638 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, also added 283 yards and a touchdown on the ground. No running backs plus 800 yards. No wide receivers plus 500 yards. They do have a great tight end, a true freshman tight end in Bowers here, 846 yards receiving, 12 touchdowns, 16.3 yards per carry average. They have a good linebacker in Dean here, 68 tackles, 6 sacks, 5 passes defended, 2 interceptions, including a touchdown, and 2 forced fumbles. But none of those numbers, if you were looking at a team and you hadn't looked at their record or watched them play all season, and you kind of looked through that, you go, this kind of looks like a 10-win team. That's what you look at with those numbers. None of them pop off the board. What makes Georgia special, what makes them the best defense in the country, what makes them a successful offense is the fact that it's not built on any one specific player. It's not just talent that they're relying on. They are built on incredible coaching and amazing game plans. Just absolutely brilliant adaptivity in the preparation that they bring into preparing for these teams and adapting on the fly, not just waiting till halftime. A lot of programs, my Boise State Broncos as well, kind of struggled this season with that. You're waiting till halftime to adapt. Not just waiting till halftime to adapt, adapting on the fly. This is the defense. I'm going to look at some numbers here real quick and read them off to you that is going to be astounding. Now, to show you just how dominant this defense specifically is. The offense has made it work based on the defense, but Georgia is a team that is built on their defense. Like I said, those offensive stats, not that impressive, but they have, and this was prior to their last playoff game, so of course the stats here have been tweaked a little bit, but they are the number 1 defense in points per game allowed was 9.8 points. The number 2 defense in yards per game allowed, 265.1, and the number 3 defense in first downs per game allowed, only 14.6 first downs per game allowed, and that's it. With the statistics that we read off, and if you go through the rest of their defensive players, the highest defensive number that they have on the team as far as tackles go is like 68 tackles, and one player with 6 sacks, and one player with 5.5, but not really massive numbers across the board. In fact, this was going into the last playoff game. They had no player with over 5 sacks, yet they had 41 sacks in the season. No player with more than 61 tackles, yet they had 804 tackles on the year. No player with more than 2 picks, and they had 12 interceptions. And no player with more than 2 forced fumbles, and they had 8 forced fumbles. This is a team that is built across the board. They are true team concept. And you know what this means for Georgia here is that Georgia has turned the corner. This is not a one-hit wonder program like LSU was a couple seasons ago that's built around one key player, in their case Joe Burrows, or several key players. This is a team that is built for long-term success because it doesn't matter who you slide into this offense, who you slide into this defense. The game plan, as long as you can keep the coaching staff, is going to continue to have success because that's what Georgia has built. And it's truly incredible to see a Georgia team that has been so close. I mean, they have worked so hard to get to where they are today. To see a Georgia team that has finally put together a team that's this dominant, this could be the start of a very long championship-winning dynasty for this program. That's what we're looking at with this Georgia team. So let's look at the keys to victory here. So for Alabama, the first one is don't assume that you know Georgia. This is not the same Georgia team that you played in the SEC championship game, and it's not the same Georgia team that you've seen over the last few seasons. This is a Georgia team that has turned the corner, that is moving forward into the future at a very rapid rate, that is going to give you one heck of a run for your money in this game. The second one here is don't put it all on Bryce Young's shoulders. Prolific quarterback, Heisman winner, but he's still only a sophomore here. First season that he's taken a heavy load. Bryce Young can make some mistakes. Now, he doesn't make a lot of them, but he can make some mistakes. This is a national championship level game. There is a lot of pressure and expectations. I mean, whether the odds are on Alabama or not, which they're not, they're on Georgia. Whether the odds are in Alabama's favor or not, it doesn't matter. Alabama's the team that you expect to come in and win this game. And there is such a legacy. They are absolute quarterback you. There's such a legacy of Alabama quarterbacks that there is probably more pressure on this one kid than there's any other team or any other player in the nation. So he's already going to be big stage. He's going to come through for you. He's going to have a good game. But don't put it all on his shoulders. Establish that running game, which is what Nick Saban loves to do anyway. Give him some easy passes. Don't try to put it all on this one player. You're not a one-hit wonder team. You're a team that's built with stacked strength across the board. You heard those stats that I read off earlier. That's my second key here for Alabama. Don't put it all on Bryce Young's shoulder, even though you might be tempted to with that Heisman bling and the season that he's had. Things can go south quickly, especially for a young quarterback on the biggest stage. Don't put it all on this one kid. The third one here is that make Georgia one-dimensional. This is a team that's pretty balanced across the board. Despite not having any more than 8, I think they had like 746 was their number one runner. But no 800-plus yard runners and sub 3,000 yards passing. They actually get it done pretty well across the board. Balanced offense, 253.9 yards per game passing and 194.6 yards per game rushing. So they are actually a pretty balanced attack. But for Alabama, they need to make them one-dimensional, and specifically I'm thinking they need to take away that run game. If they can take away that run game and force Bennett into the air, he is that definitely, Georgia, if they have a weak point, and I'm not the first one to point this out, I think he would admit it himself. If they have a weak point, it is Stetson Bennett here. He is definitely not the strongest quarterback in the nation. He's a championship level quarterback here, but I think that's more because he's on a championship level team versus him truly being the skill sets of a championship level quarterback. So they force him into the air, they take away his run game, they make him start to put the game on his shoulders entirely. I think that he's going to start making some mistakes. On the flip side of that, if you take away the air, you take away the passing game, because Bennett is a big part of their offense. You take away the passing game, they don't have that workhorse, that one player that can take over the game on the ground. They don't really have that. So either way, whatever Alabama's doing, I think that they should focus in on one thing and try to force either Georgia to the air or to the ground, but make them one-dimensional in one facet there. So my keys here for Georgia, my number one key here is, as far as the wide receivers go, and they've got two really good ones here for Alabama, Williams and Metchie, both of them over 1,000 yards receiving. We already talked about Williams, but Metchie has 1,142 yards receiving himself. You can't double team both of them, obviously. They're both massive threats here for Alabama. What Georgia needs to do is they need to switch up the focus. So they need to key in on one guy, make Bryce Young think that he's got a receiver he can go to reliably. Obviously cover him, but key up the focus on one receiver and switch that up intermittently throughout the game between these two players. So you're going back and forth, maybe you're double teaming one guy this time, double team the next guy the next time. Don't let Bryce Young be able to know that he's one player that he can always go to. Make him have to second guess himself. And against a Georgia defense that switches things up a lot, that is, like I said, it's not just built on one player, it is built on the game plan as a whole, is already an incredibly difficult defense to diagnose. So for Georgia here, make Stetson Bennett not be able to go to one key receiver the whole game. Force him to spread the ball around, and in so doing, make him have to make those decisions, maybe take a little bit longer. The ball maybe leads to some more sacks. So the second one here, second key is let Bennett air it out and test Bama's defense. Now, I don't want Stetson Bennett. For Georgia, don't allow yourself to become one-dimensional. Don't put the entire game on Stetson Bennett's shoulders. But I think you do need to lean heavily into this quarterback that is struggling from struggling from some confidence issues. You want to let him get into this game and get a confidence boost, because whether you're a favorite or not, you probably do need at least something to swing your way to get the win in this one, because this is a good Alabama team. This is an Alabama team that is used to being here. You are the underdog in this matchup. No matter what Vegas, no matter what ESPN's saying, you are the underdog in this matchup. So Georgia, they need a momentum boost. They need something to shift the game in their direction. And putting the game here in Stetson Bennett's hands and allowing him to air it out and get that big play is going to do a couple of things. I mean, it's going to maybe loosen up your running game a little bit. It's going to bring you some momentum. But more than anything, it's going to put confidence in the one player that the entire offense flows through, who you need to have an absolute lights-out game to get a win against Alabama. And my final key here is don't get spooked by the lights and the stage. Georgia, I don't think they're going to. I mean, they've played at such a high level this season. They obviously stumbled in the championship game, but I think there were some other factors here. But this for Georgia, you embrace the team that you are becoming. You are not the same program of the last few years. You are a Georgia team that can step up on a routine basis and face down Alabama on a level, completely equal playing field. That's the Georgia team that has emerged this season, that has been emerging, honestly, over the last few years. This is the Georgia program that we've come to know, and I think this is the Georgia program we're going to see in the future going into the next few seasons. So embrace that. 8-2 last season, 11-2 the year before that, and now going to the national championship game. Embrace the team that you have become, and don't allow yourself to be spooked by the fact that you're playing Alabama in the national championship, a game that they are familiar with. Every player on that team, except for maybe the true freshmen, know what this stage is like for Alabama. Don't allow yourself to be put off by the fact that you're the newcomers to this stage. You've earned that right. Go out there and prove it. So my predictions on this one. It's tough. It's really tough for me in this game, because these are, like I said, they're the two best teams in the nation, and Georgia is an incredible story. The way that they have revived, I wouldn't say revived their program necessarily, not that they were really down, they were never a basement dweller or anything like that, but the fact that they have brought their program to this level is incredible, and I have a lot of respect for that and what they've been able to do, and I love defenses. I really love defenses and how dominant this defense is. And I think that they were playing under themselves in that SEC championship game. But on the other hand, you have Nick Saban, the best coach in the country, as his salary will prove, and as his record will prove, the best coach in the country, who has been recruiting at such a high level. And though Georgia is now getting into that stage, and Georgia's been recruiting well as in addition to that, or likewise, but Georgia has also been recruiting at a high level, but not at the Saban level. Nick Saban is the best recruiter, in my opinion, even if he's not necessarily the top recruiting class every year. He is the best recruiter in the country. The kids that play for Alabama, they second string and third string players could be starters anywhere else. And Georgia, I think, is going to start getting to, not necessarily eclipsing, but equaling out with Alabama in that recruiting play. But right now, Alabama definitely, I think, owns a depth advantage over Georgia in this one. Maybe not every position, but certain key positions, I think, overall throughout this team. It's Saban. Alabama's used to being here. This is their home away from home. They know what to do. They have been on the stage so many times. And the most dangerous thing here for Alabama is they're coming with a chip on their shoulder. They are the underdog. It's a position they're not used to being able to play from. They are the underdog in this matchup, coming in down, was it 3 points, right? They're down 3 points, given only, given 58.2% odds against them to win this game. They aren't necessarily the best Alabama team that we've seen. They have had some close losses. That's the other thing here with Alabama. they are scary because they're scared. They have almost lost, like we said, those 4 games, and they didn't destroy Cincinnati like they should have, or what a lot of people thought that they should have. So this is not an Alabama team that is going to be caught, unprepared in this one. They're scared at the fact that they've been so close to losing it all along this season, and they're going to come in. And if Alabama comes in, extra prepared on a normal basis, imagine how prepared they're going to be coming into this game on the national championship level against the best team that they face, playing their best game plan with the fact that they've been so close to losing against some subpar teams along the way. This Alabama team is going to be absolutely ready to rock and roll. And I just cannot, as much as I'd want to, I trust me, I think that Alabama's continual preeminence over college football is bad for the sport. I think it's bad to have one team that just every single year, they've got 80% odds or something like that to win the national championship. That is not good for the sport. You need parity. You need to see that you can't have massive divisions within college football. You need to have parity. You need to be able to see different teams flowing through, not just for the viewership, not just for the fans, but also for recruiting. You don't want everything flowing to one school. You don't want the power focused in one school. I definitely think it's bad for the sport to have that one program. But as much as I want to call an Alabama loss in this one, and all the stars are aligning, and I said at the beginning of the season in my preview of every single team, when I was going through and I previewed Alabama and Georgia, I said, if there was any team in the country that could beat Alabama, it would be Georgia. So if Georgia walks away with that national championship and the confetti raining down on their team at the end of this incredible season, I will not be surprised at all by that. I mean, this is less than a 50-50 coin flip. But I cannot bring myself here to make the call to pick. I am going to be rooting for Georgia to get this win, but I cannot pick against Alabama and Saban in this one, especially when he's coming down as the underdog, so focused as he is. I mean, he's had so many scares. If he had come in and dominated every single team, I think Georgia could win this game. But the fact that he has been that close to losing, I think it's going to motivate Saban, motivate this Alabama team to get the win when it counts. And I think that Alabama is going to be the team. I'm not going to say that Georgia's overconfident. I'm not going to say that they have, weaknesses that Alabama's exploit. On the contrary, I think there's weaknesses that Georgia can exploit against Alabama. But I think that ultimately Stetson Bennett here as the weak link is going to be an issue for Georgia. I don't think it's going to be necessarily as big an issue as some people think it will be, but I think it will be an issue. And I think that Alabama, just with everything that they have, for the playmakers that they have, that star talent, this time star talent and star coaching at that top level with Saban, who I do think is a better coach than Kirby Smart. I think that's going to get Alabama the win this time against an incredible team offense, team defense, and through multi-leveled incredible coaching by Georgia. Either way, I don't think we're going to see a blowout like we have in the other playoff games. I do think the wins, I'm going to give you a predicted score here, but I think that score is going to kind of pull away late to get to this score. I think it's going to be close for the large part. I think that it's going to be a very, very good game. I'm excited for it. I can't wait. Here's my final score. Alabama 38, Georgia 23. That's my predicted score. Thank you for watching this video. I've had an incredible time this season. Absolute blast. I cannot wait for next year. Again, make sure you like and subscribe. This is not my last video of the season. I do have another video. I'm going to be a couple more videos at least for the season. I think I'm going to be putting out a fix to the bowl games. Maybe Alabama and Georgia fans, you don't think any fixes are needed, but I think everybody else will agree that the bowl game system is struggling, that it's dying right now, and a fix needs to be implemented. And I have a fix for the bowl games that I'm going to be putting out in a video, and I think I'm going to put out a couple more videos, some Boise State specific videos as well. So make sure you like and subscribe. Boise fans, make sure you like and subscribe. College football fans, make sure you like and subscribe. People who like hearing names mispronounced, you'll get plenty of that when I'm going through these different players. Today was not too challenging, but you'll get to hear me mess up some if you keep listening. So thanks for watching this video. Make sure you like, subscribe. It's been a great season. I can't wait for next year. Thanks for watching. As always, go Big Blue!